Hello, my friend, and welcome to the study. It's so good to see you here today. It's been a while since I've seen you here in the study. I've been very busy too. But it's so good to take some time out. And I'm glad you decided to come here and share this afternoon. This late afternoon in September, so that we can do our September Study Almanac. I've got the window open and I can see a beautiful, beautiful deep blue September sky. You can hear the wind blowing through the leaves that are starting to dry out and age. Some of them are already beginning to show tinges of golden for the autumn. And there are some beautiful, full, fluffy clouds floating by. Some are white and some are a little grey, blue, purple, floating past in the September sky. So we have something very nice for our September Almanac, and things have been a bit crazy here, so forgive me for posting this rather late in the month. I really struggled to get this one out in time, but I hope you like it. And there will be a few noises because next door someone is unpacking boxes. So we've got a few strange sort of cardboard creaky noises, but we're not going to worry about that because that's outside of our realm here. We're going to get comfortable, get a nice cup of tea, and fuel our imagination for this first month of autumn. The astronomical autumn happens when the tilt of the Earth's rotational axis in relation to its orbit around the Sun is 23.5 degrees. This year, astronomical autumn begins on the 22nd of September and will end on the 21st of December. The meteorological seasons, though, are derived by dividing the 12-month Gregorian calendar year into 4 periods of 3 months each. Autumn then begins meteorologically on the 1st of September and will end on the 30th of November. The autumnal equinox marks the beginning of autumn in the northern hemisphere and spring in the southern hemisphere, and this occurs on the 22nd at 1919 Greenwich Mean Time, when the sun is directly over the equator. Equilux, however, is on the 25th, when day and night are exactly the same length. After that, the nights will get longer and the days shorter, and we enter the time of the year that will be for sleeping, dreaming, renewing the energy we spent over the last months, and sowing hopes and plans for the seasons to come in the new year. It is a time of bringing in all that we have gathered and sharing its bounty, of feathering our nests with happiness, comfort, and with those we love. We can bring in the fruits of the fields and forests, collect and collate our experiences, adventures, voyages, friendships and labors, and we can bring together our friends and family, both old and new. In the September sky, we see the close approach to the moon of first Saturn, then Jupiter in the morning sky, then Venus in the evening. Saturn in opposition is the highest in the sky this month, at its peak height and brightness in our sky on the 23rd. Saturn, the 6th planet from the Sun, and the 2nd largest in our solar system, is composed of gases including hydrogen, helium, and methane. On the 21st, Saturn will be at opposition, meaning Earth will be between Saturn and the Sun. This will make Saturn its closest and brightest, and it will be visible to the naked eye in the night sky. Its rings will be visible with just a small telescope or binoculars. Saturn is the most distant planet that can be seen without a telescope. It orbits the Sun every 29.4 Earth years and has 274 moons and satellites, more than any other planet. Neptune too will be at opposition on the 23rd, visible only with a telescope, rising in the east and setting in the west at sunrise. Neptune, the farthest planet in our solar system, at 4.3 billion kilometers away, orbits the Earth every 165 of our years. Neptune will be at its closest point to Earth on the 23rd, shining blue and brighter than any other time of the year. Even with an optical aid, though, Neptune appears faint, and to see it, you will need a high magnification for a clear view of this beautiful, blue, silent giant. In the forest we go for September, and autumn can be an exciting time in these forests and meadows, lakes and coasts, and great changes are afoot, as we are now losing 3 minutes of sunlight a day. Days are getting cooler as well, and so you will see the resulting changes in nature around us. The great wave of migratory birds leaving Britain in September and October is larger than in spring, swelled by the year's young birds. Among them are several million willow warblers and chiffchaffs, en route to the forests and wooded savannas of sub-Saharan Africa. They can be seen in patches of scrub, hedgerows and woodlands near the coast, just before their late October departure from British shores, as they flit through the vegetation to feed up for the long journey ahead. Seabirds, too, make their move in September and October, many heading to waters off Portugal or western coasts of Africa. Common terns go as far as the Cape of Good Hope, fishing the Benguela current and mingling with southern species such as albatrosses. Uniquely among the 5 tern species found in Britain and Ireland, they breed at gravel pits, lakes and reservoirs, as well as on coastal shingle beaches. Beautiful aerobatic displays can be seen from the terns this time of year. The little stint, a little wader, and weighs not much more than a chaffinch. This hyperactive little bird packs on board enough fat to power a migration in late summer from the Arctic tundra to the shores of Western Europe, whence, after refueling on mud-dwelling invertebrates, it continues on to Africa for the winter. So now is a time that we can also see the stopover birds coming from north and going further south. By September, rough grassy meadows can be teeming with small mammals, moving unseen through the thatch of golden stalks at ground level. Mice and field voles are great in number among those field dwellers. This is great for kestrels, whose fortunes are tied up with the chubby, short-tailed little rodents. Also, the dashing falcons occupy smaller territories and feed on these little mammals. These birds may stay on familiar home turf all year, though others, in particular juveniles fledged over the summer, move to fresh hunting grounds in autumn, often by the coast. Kestrels have an unrivaled ability to hang in midair, tilting their tails from side to side like a rudder to keep their head perfectly still as they hover over a few square inches of grass. With great efficiency, they maintain a laser-like focus on their prey before plunging for the kill. Kestrel populations are in severe decline in Britain, but the hopes are that they will continue to stay. Late summer and autumn are a very busy time also for bottlenose dolphins of Scotland. The females give birth after a 13-month gestation, and the babies can be seen between August and into September. It is around this time that the dolphin's main food source changes from migratory salmon to shoaling mackerel coming in from the North Sea. Female dolphins feed on fish like mackerel and herring because these metabolize lipids quickly, turning them into thick, rich milk for the babies. The babies will suckle for 18 months, and British and Irish waters are home to some of the world's largest and most northerly bottlenose dolphins. The hedge grows in September to erupt into a paradise of bountiful berries. These are a lifeline for many birds as the summer food supplies such as caterpillars and insects dwindle. Blackbirds and thrushes, as well as warblers, such as whitethroats and blackcaps, are all busy in these hedgerows, stocking up for the winter. Blackberry, elderberry, hawthorn haws, rosehips and blackthorn sloes are all coming into season now. But not just birds are making the most of the berry bonanza. Hazel dormice are also busy eating as much as they can to build up fat reserves before they hibernate. Pine martens, too, make the most of the bounty, with a particular penchant for rowan berries, blackberries, and bilberries. Many mammals, such as hedgehogs, squirrels, and foxes, eat berries also when available. In May and June, when elder trees were smothered in cream-colored sweet-scented flowers, the blossom buzzed with all manner of insects, hoverflies and pollen beetles. 3 months later, flower heads pollinated in spring have become luscious clusters of shiny, black, dark purple berries. These often appear black, but are actually very dark purple and unpalatable. They can be toxic to humans, but to a bird they are irresistible. Starlings, goldfinches, wood pigeons, blackbirds, thrushes, robins, tits and warblers all enjoy the fruits of autumn here. In fact, more species of bird feast on elderberries than any other native British fruit. It's not just the berries which are coming into season. It's also prime acorn hunting season too. Squirrels harvest and store them for the winter months, as well as jays. Like squirrels, jays are clever, but they too often forget where they've buried some of their stash. This means that some of the acorns are left in the ground and given the chance to grow into towering oaks. In fact, one study has found that half the trees in 2 New English woodlands were planted by jays. Another bird that hoards its food is the nuthatch, feeding on nuts and seeds. Like jays, nuthatches also hoard food for the winter, pushing acorns, hazelnuts, and seeds into gaps in the tree bark to save for later. Nuthatches are found in woodlands throughout Wales, much of England, and southern Scotland. As the weather turns colder, and particularly into late autumn, nuthatches are more likely to visit our gardens. We might also see, on the fallen leaves, or even the ones yet to fall, globs or galls. Galls are weird and wonderful growths on the plant, triggered by a chemical attack from gall wasps, midges, mites, and fungi and viruses. Many of these tiny invaders are too small to see, and even lack common names. Yet their complex lifestyles provide interesting study. But also, their galls have been used throughout the ages as ingredients for things from soaps to ink. Oak trees are among the trees most frequently targeted. Such galls on oaks include apples, marbles, or button-shaped. Silk button galls can be found on the undersides of a leaf, and each is a nursery for gall wasp larva, which overwinters on the fallen dead leaf, then hatches in spring. It might possibly be the Romans, who are said to have brought an array of new species to Britannia, including the rabbit, brown hare, carrot, stinging nettle, plum, walnut, and sweet chestnut. Sweet chestnut trees, related to beech, not horse chestnuts, provide the quintessential smell of autumn, being roasted and put into crisp paper bags for warm nibbles on a woodland wander. This is about Wells Cathedral. And here you can see this wonderful floor plan, as it were, the plan of the cathedral. Of the many interesting things about Wells are the beautiful scissor-like soaring central support in the nave, the staircase going up to the wonderful chapter house, the mechanical clock with jousting knights, and for me, I think, is just the general atmosphere of the place. So each cathedral that was built in the Gothic era would have had a large team of people. A mason, a master mason, other stonemasons, workers, would be a large community engaged on this endeavor for many years. And each of these cathedrals, building groups, as it were, would give the certain atmosphere to the place. Gloucester certainly has that, and it's interesting to see its history. But Wells, you really feel an atmosphere of warmth and kindness that the master must have felt for his masons that were working under him and boys that were carrying stone. And there's a place up above one of the doors where the master mason was measuring out in scale his plans for this ornate and really unusual cathedral at Wells. So all of his marks, his mason's measuring marks, are still there. And there's the west front. You can see the crenellations there. In the first towers. And there were spots up there for the choir to go up inside, and during religious processions coming to the church, they would sing and their voices could be heard across the way. And there are many, many of these little carvings inside and outside on the columns and pillars of little stories, flowers, knights, animals. That really lends an atmosphere to this cathedral, showing the wonderful attitudes of these stonemasons. Of course, the big giant bells. And here you can see the cathedral itself, the whole thing. There's the front portico. And then behind, the cross-shaped nave. And there's got some noise outside. It's a bit disturbing. There is where that wonderful staircase is, this round oratory that I will show you. And this is up underneath the roof, where it's packed with stones to keep the weight on top of the arches. And the tops of all of these pillars, this one is the martyrdom of King Edmund of East Anglia, telling a story. And these arches, I think, are wonderful. They really did some innovative things with the design. And there's one of the clocks, the knights outside ringing the bell. And there's that wonderful round chapter house with a staircase, one of the gates. Of course, the monastery itself was dissolved during Henry VIII, but the cathedral was allowed to stand, and it's still there. And there's part of the cloister that still exists. So you can see how, there's a beautiful flying buttress example there. You can see how how detailed this place is, and you can see the paint, the ceiling. It's beautiful colors. I'll show you some more color pictures in a minute, but this is that wonderful scissor-shaped arch with two round holes. Quite unique. That's the center of the nave there. And so we have this uninterrupted series of arches. And we've got this beautiful, almost figure-8 shape there. So I just wanted to show you a few of the pictures from this fantastic old book. I mean, it really takes days to go through this cathedral, and it's really well worth it. There's just so much to see, so many little details that the masons put in here and there. There's the chained library. I'll show you a few pictures of my trips there as well, so that you can have an idea. And that's the Saxon font that was brought in from the former cathedral. Then I'll tell you, there's our jousting clock. And the knights come round every hour on the hour. I'll show you that. fantastic. And here we have a lot more detail. And all of the misericords. These are the seats, the folding seats. When you fold up the seats, you can also fold down a tiny bit so that the monks could kind of support themselves while they were standing for so long at prayers and services. And they were often in medieval cathedrals and chapels decorated very elaborately, carvings on them. And here we can see all of the wonderful things that were on these ones at Wells. A cat playing the fiddle, a man stabbing the head of a dragon, a puppy biting a cat, 2 ducks conversing, dragons fighting, 2 birds about to drink from an ewer, 2 goats butting, a monkey holding an owl, a boy pulling a thorn from his foot, all kinds of wonderfully imaginative things. So visiting a cathedral like this really takes you into another world. And all the little chapels. There are a number of fantastic cathedrals in Britain, and I think Wells is my favourite. The other 2 favourites of mine being Winchester and Gloucester, although York is also impressive, as is Salisbury, but by far I think Wells is my favourite. And here's that staircase, that curved staircase that goes into the chapter house. The round chapter house is over here. And this staircase is just a fantastic feat of masonry. There it's coming up, and there's the round chapter house. And there's a beautiful view from the pond behind. It's beautiful water. It's this medieval filing cabinet there. And the cloister where the receiver of the vicar's choral took place. Lockers to hold the vestments. And also a list of all the bishops of Wells. And of course Glastonbury, which is right nearby. It's quite a place. Now, with that rather long introduction, let's get a little bit about the history. The Wells, in Anglo-Saxon Vela, to which Wells owes both its name and its origins, bubble up in the garden of the nearby Bishop's Palace. 4 million gallons of water flow there every day, making their way from Bishop's Eye down Wells High Street. The most northerly spring and the largest of the 4 was held to be a holy well and dedicated to St. Andrew. It has also been surmised that British tribes worshipped at these wells. The earliest archaeological evidence for worship on this site is a Romano-British mausoleum with stone-lined burial chamber still intact, discovered during an archaeological excavation in the 1970s. In about AD 705, the Saxon king of Wessex, Ine, founded a church on this site, which lay within a royal estate. This was situated on the fringes of the new diocese of Sherborne, and was a minster church. In other words, a church that looked beyond the diocese to an area that was not yet served by a network of parishes, and the town grew up around this church, providing services for the craftsmen who built it and the priests. A number of religious buildings were appearing in this part of Wessex in the Anglo-Saxon period, but the minster church of St. Andrew would have been one of the most imposing. A first documented reference to it is in a charter of 766, which refers to it as the minster near the great spring of Wells. As a majority of it lies under the east cloister, much of the minster church has not been excavated. Wells has a rich hinterland and flourishing minster church, so as a town it prospered much. It became a cathedral for the seat of a bishop, and the first two bishops indeed translated to Canterbury, and almost all of the Anglo-Saxon bishops were monks who, somewhat surprisingly, made no attempt to introduce a monastic rule in the cathedral. So we can see this free spirit at Wells. At the time of the Norman conquest, Bishop Giza had the support of the Archdeacon at Wells, and several clergy called canons, and a provost who was responsible for the estates which supported them. In 1088, King William Rufus granted Bath Abbey and its estates to Bishop John of Tours, who promptly moved his seat to Bath, and Wells ceased to be a cathedral. In the mid-12th century, Bishop Robert of Lewis did some major rebuilding work on this former cathedral, and reorganized the canons into a properly constituted chapter, building up their number to about 30. The cathedral, as it presently stands, began its construction around 1175 on a new site to the north of the old Minster Church. Unlike other English cathedrals of that period, Wells was the first to be built in the Gothic style. Bishop Reginald de Beaune had bought the revolutionary architectural style back from his visit to France. This early English Gothic style is now only evident in the proportions of the building, its breadth compared to its height, the interior of the nave almost unaltered, and the design and execution of the west front. The idea of the west front is attributed to the master mason Adam Locke and his bishop Jocelyn. As Locke died in 1229, when only the plinth was in place, his deputy and successor, Thomas Norreys, created the west front's design in all its intricate glory. In the Middle Ages, the stone was painted inside and out, so the west front would have looked like a gigantic picture book. There are very few traces of paint left, but enough has remained in small areas to determine the extent of the polychrome. The sculpted work, which would have been emphasized in bright colors, is still one of the cathedral's glories. On the west front, Almost 300 of the original 400 medieval statues remain today. As well as the individual statues, the central section under the great gable is one of the most celebrated parts of the west front. It depicts the Day of Judgment, faithfully drawn from the Book of Revelation. The Wells Chapter House is the only octagonal chapter house to be built as a first story on top of an undercroft, which was the strong room of the cathedral. A crypt would not have been practical because of underground water. The undercroft itself was certainly constructed by 1266, just after the completion of the west front. But work on the staircase between 1265 and 1280, and then on the chapter house itself, 1286 to 1306, proceeded slowly. Intricate sculpture had developed considerably since the early Gothic period, and the chapter house is a triumph of the decorated style. Delicate ball flowers surround each window arch, and the vault bosses have beautiful leaf designs. The chapter house is also home to the earliest stained glass in the cathedral. It was built as a place for the presbyteries or canons to meet and discuss cathedral affairs or to conduct legal proceedings. There are over 40 seats around the outer walls, which are marked with headstops under the canopies, and humorous and mischievous faces have been carved in all the corners. The Wells Cathedral, which was still not entirely monastic, was spared the worst results of the Protestant Reformation under the Tudors, although it led to the destruction of monasteries like Glastonbury. The King's chief minister and lay dean of Wells, Thomas Cromwell, moved most of the Wells Cathedral treasures and the contents of its library to London for safekeeping. However, Wells did not entirely escape the Reformation. The internal walls, covered with biblical pictures and images of saints, were whitewashed. A pulpit for the new custom of preaching was built, and the chantry chapels built for saying masses for the dead became redundant. In 1547, an Act of Parliament abolished chantries, and this severely reduced the cathedral's income. Though pious people used to leave money at chantry altars and chapels to pay for the saying of masses for the souls of the dead, to speed their journey through purgatory to heaven, when chantries were abolished, this income was confiscated by the crown. This forced the chapter to sell furnishings of the chapels, medieval memorial brasses, and lead from the roof to make up the loss. 3 chantry chapels became redundant, although the structures remained, but the mortuary chapel of Bishop Stillington was demolished stone by stone. All the paintings of biblical scenes and saints which covered the internal walls were whitewashed, and a pulpit was constructed in the nave. During the reign of Queen Mary, Catholic rites were again established, and involved this chapter in more expense for the purchase of new vestments and psalters. The restoration of religious harmony in the country finally came under Queen Elizabeth I, who granted both the Dean and Chapter and the College of Vicars Choral new charters for their government in 1591. Wells was to see more change and more challenges in the coming reign of Charles II and the Restoration after the Civil War and the rebellions of 1685 under James II. The cathedral also suffered in the Great Storm of 1703 by forces of nature. And in the Victorian period, there were different eras of decline and rebuilding. The cathedral, as it stands today, has many of its original treasures, and the structure is still magnificent. It remains as a splendid example of English early Gothic. So, my friends, that is our September Almanac for the study. I've put a few more little additions to our September disc with our berries and a Wells Cathedral, fox, and a happy little mackerel, and all of the leaves still green but just about to change, with a center on the beautiful planet of Saturn in opposition in our skies. It's been really tough getting this video out this month, so thank you for being so patient. I hope you've enjoyed relaxing with me and that you've had a lovely September and are looking forward to more study time in the next month ahead. I will be here as always to welcome you to your special place in the study of calm and peace. Be good to yourself, my friend. Be kind to others. And as always, be extraordinary.